I want to go over a bunch of the different stuff that we can do in Chapter 5, which mostly has to do with dealing with color in Photoshop. So I want to show you a couple of very specific panels: the swatches, the color, and the libraries panels. You can get to all of these under Window, and there you'll see color and swatches and libraries. Now the book is going to start you off looking at some of the different color modes. The ones that you need to understand are, of course, RGB and CMYK. There are a couple of others that Photoshop understands. I'll show them all to you. RGB and CMYK are the two primary ones. And then there's some others that are a little bit more advanced. Lab channel, multi-channel. There's also an HSB and a couple of others. For right now, red, green, blue, and cyan, magenta, yellow, and black are the two that you should worry about. The swatches panel gives you access to a little more than 100 fun little colors that are already pre-selected for you. You can add a new library. All of these are libraries that you can add, including ones called Pantone, which you may need, you may not. For the most part, the default ones are going to be just perfectly fine. When we get into some of the more advanced color stuff, we'll worry about the other color modes that are out there. You can also mix and match your own colors. The color slider here lets you scrabble through the rainbow, pick a color, and you can pick any color out of here that you would like. You may want to see sliders instead. Instead of a cube, let's do RGB sliders. There we go. So this lets you change the numbers individually. And the little tiny color bar in here will adapt and change as you move these colors around. But we can also do CMYK sliders. Now it does not matter which you choose. This image, if you can see up in the little tab here, is RGB, but I can mix colors in the color panel in CMYK or RGB, which is kind of cool. Now let's say that I'm going to create a color here of some kind. Looking for purplish. That's fine. Doesn't really matter what color it is. You can take these colors that you create in the foreground area and save them as a swatch. And I'll name this is sort of a, I don't know, bluish. That's fine. I can label the color anything that I want. Click OK, and it shows up right here. Let me show you. I'll make something completely different. Nice baby food yellow. Now that's added to my swatches panel, so I can create as many as I want. Now you may have seen that there's an option, add to my current library. Every time I did that, they popped up down here in the libraries panel. This is a cloud storage area that's accessible across all of your different Adobe Creative Cloud programs if you have a paid subscription. If you don't have a paid subscription, this doesn't work. But it's storing these, and I can go over to Illustrator or InDesign, and in their libraries panels, these will be here, and I can even access them on the web. There's another way to grab color, and it uses a tool, and this is called the eyedropper. And it literally looks like a little eyedropper. And what it lets you do is you can click anywhere on the page, and you'll have to watch the foreground color here, but as I click around, it will change. So let me grab this one, and I'll create a new swatch, and I'll name this one lemon yellow. And that's been added. So now I've got a nice little color scheme going down here. It's not great, but it's not bad either. So yeah, you can create as many new colors, swatches as you want, and it's pretty fluid. Another thing that you're allowed to do with color, besides just painting, is you can use the paint bucket. And I'm gonna, in my layers panel, I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna use the paint bucket tool, which is the letter G on your keyboard. And for right now, I'm just gonna use white, which is all your CMYK values set to 0. And when I paint it in with the paint bucket, it covered everything. But let me make this a little bit bigger for you. You can see the options here. There we go. My lemon layer is now underneath of this white layer. So I can take this layer and simply pull it under my lemon layer. And you're allowed to do this as much as you want. Layers can be restacked and shuffled infinitely. I want to show you how to, the next level past the paint bucket is the gradient tool, but I need to have 2 colors selected. So I want to show you another way that I can do that. You can click directly on the foreground color and you will get the color picker. And here I can grab whatever color I like. You go through the rainbow with this little rainbow slider, and then out here you can choose low saturation colors, high saturation colors, closer to white, closer to black, whatever you want. This is pretty much the entire gamut of green. Now, you may notice as I move my mouse around, there's a little triangle that pops up right here. This means I've selected an RGB only color. This color cannot be reproduced in print. As I move closer down to here, there's it's sort of mostly the upper right area that cannot be reproduced with CMYK. These are colors that are so vibrant that only a computer screen can create them, which is fine because right now I'm working in RGB. So I'll click OK on that one. And Photoshop lets you have 2 colors selected at the same time. So I'm going to grab this background color and do the exact same thing. Green, let's do a nice pretty blue. There we go. Now if you use the paint bucket, let me make sure I'm on the right layer, all you have to do is swap the colors and you can switch between them. The paint bucket uses whatever the foreground color currently is. Make sure that you have the right layer selected, because if I had layer 0 selected, my lemon layer, and I went in and clicked on it somewhere, it's going to give me that. So be careful. You usually know pretty quickly if you got the wrong layer. Okay, so now I've got 2 colors selected. Now I'm going to use the other tool I mentioned a moment ago called the gradient tool. This gradient tool lets me paint with multiple colors at once, essentially. The first color is always the foreground color fading out into the background color. The second one is always the foreground color fading out to transparent. And then the rest of these are sort of built in by default. So what you do is you simply drag a line with it, and it controls the angle of your gradient, even how far it goes. Now I can choose any one of these. Here's the fairly classic sunset. If I turn my lemon layer off, you can see it a little better. These don't have to be fading from one color into another. There are several different ones. This is a radial gradient, where it does it in a circle. And of course, you can choose any of these that you like. This is not reflection. This is angle. It sort of wraps around itself and creates some neat effects. This one's reflection, where it just sort of mirrors itself. And then there's a diamond one. So they're kind of neat. I don't think the effect is that great, but it's a cool thing that you can use. Okay. So those are gradients. If you ever need to go back to a black to white gradient, or you just don't want these colors anymore, instead of swapping them, which this little button lets you do, you can go back to the default, and all of this is down the bottom of the tools panel. Swap your colors, or set them back to a default black and white. Oh, I still have the same gradient selected. I do end up using gradients a lot to create fading effects, which requires layer masks. So this gradient stuff is actually very useful, but the way I'm using it right now is still kind of a cheesy, just getting to know it kind of way. Okay, so you can select colors, you can hold on to a whole bunch of different colors. Now I'm going to show you some color manipulation using what are called the adjustment layers, adjustment panels. Each one of these is also accessible down here. At the bottom of the layers panel, there is a little symbol right here. Every one of these corresponds to all of these adjustment panel things. So the ones that I want you to play with today, the first one is going to be hue saturation. You can see it deals more with rainbows. What this will do is it will put a layer, I wanted it to be on top. This layer acts like a filter on everything that's underneath of it. If I change the hue, I literally change the rainbow colors of everything here. There, now I have grapefruit. You can make them even more saturated or less saturated. There's also, again, lightness too, but it does sort of the whole image. It's not great. Set that to 0. There's also one called Colorize, which works a little bit nicer. This will sort of give you an old printing in one color kind of effect, and the book is going to have you check this on and off a couple times, and you'll see how it plays. But it gives you just a different effect if it's one you're looking for. Other adjustment layers you can play with include the brightness contrast. I'm going to turn the colorize off. That's my hue and saturation one. This is my brightness contrast. Here we go. You can see that it pretty much does what you'd think. Brightness is used to lighten or darken the whole image. Contrast will blow out your colors a little bit or mute them. There's an option at the bottom called Use Legacy, which would make it a little bit more heavy-handed. When you do the contrast now, this follows a more rigorous mathematical model. It's not quite as smart. It ends up blowing out your image a lot more. Uncheck that by default, and it tends to create a nicer version of these. The last one the book is going to go over is one called Color Balance. So we got that one off. Here's Color Balance. Now, this is a little bit odd, but on the color wheel, cyan is directly opposite of red, magenta is directly opposite of green, and yellow is the opposite of blue. What I'll be able to do is take these colors, this image, and push it into other colors. So now you can see I've made it incredibly yellow. It looks like a candy bar wrapper. But I could cool the colors down significantly too. Now it looks kind of rotten and gross. And that's just you can cast the colors however you need to. You don't need to make them quite as extreme as I'm doing here. And the neat thing is that you can combine all of these effects. Every one of these can be turned on or off. Sometimes they'll even change things if you rearrange the order of them. There we go. So each one of these is like a piece of film that you can put over top of your image, and it affects everything underneath of it. These big white blocks right here are layer masks, which I don't want to get into for this video. The only other thing that I know some students had questions about was the healing brush. And I thought I'd give you an example of how that works with this. Let me reset my workspace here. So this is sort of a before and after of some stuff that the healing brush can kind of do. So let me zoom in here. The healing brush is not that one, it's these. There's two of them. There's the healing brush and the spot healing brush. The spot healing brush is probably the easier one to use. I'm going to increase the size of this so it's fairly large. Pretty much you click on stuff and blemishes disappear. It actually tries to pull information from just around to modify it. It's kind of amazing, but it's not perfect. So the other one is the healing brush tool. And when you click on it, you're probably going to get this. Alt-click to define a source point to be used to repair the image. Yeah, that one's kind of annoying. So what you're going to need, the way that this works is you hold down the Alt button on a Windows. If you're on a Mac, hold down Alt Option. And I'm going to start from her eyeball. You click somewhere, and then let go of Alt. You can see her eye is now following me around. I'm going to repaint her eye in somewhere else. And weird stuff like that is going to happen. Now obviously that's probably not what you want to use, but what I can do with this is I can copy this this hem right here, paint a bit of it in. I'm kind of making a duplicate, but that's okay. Some of this is cleanable with one of these tools. Usually sometimes you have to end up using both of them. Shrink that down a little bit. There we go. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes you get duplicates of everything. But that's the way that the two brushes work. For the most part, you can do all the stuff that you need with the spot healing, and then the regular healing is you have to use that weird alt-click thing. Let me see if I can give you another example of that. I'm going to alt-click here in her hair. Ooh, I'm going to use the right tool. Healing brush. Alt-click in her hair, and then I can go anywhere. And you'll see that I'm actually kind of painting a duplicate. Then it's going to try and mesh those together. This is used in a lot of photo restoration stuff. Old Civil War photos and old family pictures and stuff. And you can see that they've taken this a little bit further and blackened out the background and all that kind of stuff and bumped up the colors on the right-hand side. But using pretty much just the spot healing tool, you can probably fix the vast majority of the blemishes in the background. It's kind of amazing. Be careful if you get into a high contrast area. It will tend to do weird things. And usually it just ends up blurring stuff out. Okay.